will be joining along. Okay, right. So, as you know, we're going to be going through some of the homework that we've received so far. Okay, right. So, hopefully, you can all see this at the very least. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is take a look at what we have on our Stackademic dashboard, or at least on my dashboard as a teacher. One thing as well I've noticed is that I should be able to share my code editor this time. There was actually a setting that I had wrong on my computer. So at least from now on, when we start doing code, when you start to see the code in our lessons, it's going to be much better. So let me just reply to, actually, no, Devesh, it looks like you're in. That's cool. So thank you for being there. Oh, by the way, anybody, if you would be so kind, feel free to share a link to this on your Twitter accounts. So this is an open session. Anybody can be present if they want. So, right, okay, let's share our screen. And I'm going to share, to begin with, my Stackademic dashboard. So this will be something that you've never seen before. Okay, so this is basically what I see at the moment when you submit homework. And we can see the links for everyone. So the first one I'm going to pick is Gary, because Gary mentioned to me on Twitter that he wanted me to have a look at his homework. So I'll take this link, and from what I can see here, it looks like you've submitted the link a little bit different, Gary. So typically we would expect it to just be a normal URL, kind of like the one we can see here for Alex, whereas yours appears to be kind of a almost like a link that you'd use for doing SSH rather than doing kind of your regular URL. So I'll have to just change that. Okay. Right. So we've got some code here. I'm going to be a little bit manual with this. I'm just going to actually just copy and paste the code rather than what you would typically do, which would be something along the lines of cloning the repository. But we're just going to do this because I don't want to end up with loads and loads of files on my computer that I've got to get rid of afterwards. So we'll copy this HTML and CSS. Okay, right, so we've got that. I'm going to paste that into my VS Code. Then we will stop streaming that one for a moment, and we will switch to my VS Code. And I should have this thing that allows us to view it straight away. I don't remember what it's called. I don't remember what it was called. Let me just check one moment. This is kind of one of the fun things about doing these things live is that I've come into this with zero preparation. By the way, I've not looked at any of your code, so hopefully I'll be able to rectify things and fix things straight away. Now I saw this VS Code extension that looked quite interesting called Live HTML Previewer, and this is what I wanted to use. So what am I looking for? Okay, side preview. These instructions are terrible. Whoever made this extension needs to make some better instructions. For side preview, use the binding Control Q and S, or press F1 and type. Okay, fine. All right, so F1. Well, I'm on a Mac, so my F1s don't do the same thing. So that's no good. All right, so Control Command S. Show. Well, that's no good. It doesn't work, does it? So whoever made this extension, and you've got 574,000 downloads, whatever you've made doesn't seem to bloody work. All right, okay. What about that? Oh, well, that was way easier. I could have just pressed open to the side on it. Right, so hopefully that's going to do something. So far, it doesn't seem to be, which is great. Okay, so open in browser. Oh, that's really frustrating. I'm sorry about this, everyone. Hopefully this is going to sort itself out. Again, more fun when you just rely on someone's extension and you just hope it will work. Right, just bear with me one moment, everybody. Let me just try this one more time. There must be a way to do this. Otherwise, the person who's made this extension is very frustrating. All right, Control Q S. This doesn't work. That's no good. All right, do you know what? That sucks, but fine. We'll have to just do this in a slightly awkward way. So we'll have to just use CodePen. I mean, if anyone watching happens to know of any good live preview extensions for VS Code, but not ones that open the preview in a browser window, but ones that actually open it inside of VS Code, then please do let me know and I'll try them out. But otherwise, we will just move on and look at using... Right, okay. So we're eventually getting somewhere. Let's switch this screen to a different one. Okay. Right, a pen. Okay, right. Let's just change that view to that. We don't need JavaScript. Right, okay. Interesting. Although, where has it just gone? Oh, here it is. Okay, right. So the Candyman. Okay, so first off the bat, I like this. This looks cool. So let's just see why our logo is not showing up. In fact, let's see what errors it gives us here. Okay, so that's just to do with with CodePen. It doesn't require the head content or the kind of just the HTML. It just accepts body content, but it's not going to break, so it's fine. So we can ignore that. Let's just try and find where this image was. And okay, so that's just not loading up because it's not within our CodePen, so that's not a big deal. But looking at this, I mean, it looks pretty good. I'm curious to know what the issue you had was, because I mean, yeah, I mean, you mentioned something about it, so let's have a look. Oh, actually, I just realised I can see all of your chats on here, so that's cool. So actually, what's the point of an extension that opens in a browser window anyway? Well, yeah, no, I agree. Try live server. Well, that's what we've got before, but it's not helping us with the screen sharing. Anyway, so we've got this, and Papa Tuck. I mean, if you're there, I'd love to know what the issue you had was, because you said there was something to do with padding and the margins, but this looks pretty good. I mean, let's just dive into it a bit more. Okay, right. So if we look at this aside, okay, so you've got 100 VH on it. Okay. Right, okay, so the grid layout on the main doesn't look too bad. I mean, one thing to bear in mind is that the aside tag that you've got, so you can't see the Chrome developer tools, unfortunately, in the stream, but hopefully you can see the highlighting that goes on when I'm highlighting certain things. Let me just move this screen onto the second one. So the good thing about Chrome developer tools is when you're using grid and you highlight things, it shows the outlines. So I can see here that you've been using, well, you basically split it into 4 quarters. So that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. One thing to bear in mind, though, is that I can see this sidebar you've got on the right-hand side, the one that's kind of got the greenish border. It looks like you've used an aside tag. Now, that's aside tags are good. That's what we've been preaching for the whole time. But it's worth bearing in mind that you're not meant to use them inside of main tags, which is what we've got here by the looks of it. So we should really have this outside of it, in which case your grid, or at least the HTML tags that you're using, probably needs a little bit of rewiring. So let's just have a look further down this page. I'm curious to know what else you're doing with this grid. Okay, so we've got logo, we've got images, we've got story, which appears to be this aside. Right. So one thing I'd say is that it looks like you're using a section tag, and then you've got the aside inside of the section. From what I gather, it looks like one of those is redundant. So you've put an element inside of an element, but there's no reason for it to be inside of there. So you could just get rid of the section tag. But I mean, for the most part, this is pretty good. I'm surprised that you mentioned some things that you're potentially having issues with, because this looks like a good start. If we have a look at this nav bar you've got at the top, I can see you've used a position fixed. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You've put a Z index on there of 1. That's cool. Let me just check something. So we've got this header. I'm just wondering if I take off this Z index, does anything change? No. So it doesn't change anything, even though I've taken that Z index off. And the reason is because you've not got any other elements around it that also have a position on there. So this position fixed that I've highlighted on the left, That's cool. That's what's making it stay at the top. But if you're using Z-index, it's only going to interact with other elements that also have a position property on it, if that makes sense. So because you haven't got any other properties that have position, that Z-index doesn't do anything. But I mean, it's not a bad practice, so it's okay. It's cool. It's just worth bearing that in mind. So I like what you've done here with the display flex and justify justify content flex end. That's good. That's basically what's pushing it over to the right hand side here. So that's great. We can see here if we change this to something like space between, it's going to spread it out across the top, or at least it should do. That's really weird that it's not, unless that's something to do with the fixed. Let's have a look. Right, okay, that's weird that it's not. What that will be is maybe you've not got a width on this, that's why. Okay, so you've got one UL. Okay, that's not a bad thing. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's try that, Devesh. As you've said, space around. Cool. So it puts it in the middle there. What I was looking to try and do, I mean, because that's fine, that looks okay still. I mean, it's got a width of 100 on it as well. So the thing is, if you do things like space between and space around, it should be spreading those three elements across the entire width. For some reason, it's not. So let's do. Well, let's take a look at how much content space this is taken up. So that's okay. It looks like it's 100%. But then what happens is, if we look at this, inside of the nav, there's a UL element on it. And that doesn't have 100% width on it. So you'll see here below this nav menu class that we've got here is only being used on here. But then we've got this UL immediately below it. And that is this stuff here is what is influencing this. So let's take that off for a moment. We could even take the class off of there, put it on there. And then we start to get what we wanted. I can't remember what the thing is for, what is it, list style type? None. Okay, so if we want to get rid of those bullet points, we could, inside of our UL, put list style type none. And then that starts to stretch it out across the top anyway. And then if we wanted, we could put space around back on, as Devesh mentioned, and then it spreads them out across the top. It's not to say that looks great or anything like that, but it gives you some options. Maybe what I'd do is create some space between them. Not like that, of course, but well, to be fair, I'd maybe get rid of this position fixed as well anyway. And then put this back to that. Maybe put some padding on it. In fact, just 10 pixels. And then we can start to push it down a little bit. But all in all, this looks pretty good. I think this is in a good place. And one thing that I thought was pretty cool that you did, Papa Tuck, is some of you were already know how to do this, but there's something you can do for if you ever want to put those copyrights at the bottom, but you don't want to have to update it every year. There are a few different ways you can do this, but essentially, Gary has used JavaScript to create the year. So he's got this document write thing here, but then he's just basically doing new date, get full year. Whereas, if you were hard coding the value, you'd just put 2021 there. but then every year you'd have to remember to update it. So this is just something that will update it on the fly. I will not update it on the fly. What it's doing is it's creating it every time the page is loaded. There are pros and cons to that. But all in all, I think this is pretty good. So let's move on. And I'm going to give that one a pass. Gosh, I've got so many tabs open. Very frustrating. Right, in the meantime, how is everybody doing today? I'm going to assume that you're all doing really well. Okay. Right, share screen. Okay. Right, so let's pick rituals. So, in fact, I'll pick some of these in a bit. I know because some of you are on here now. Let me see if I've got any homework from Devesh. Here we go. Okay. And how am I doing today, Devesh? I'm doing pretty good, thank you. I'm doing well. I just need to make sure I mark Papa Tuck's homework as correct, as complete. Even though that link is not complete, but the homework itself is, so that's cool. Right. Okay. Right. Devesh. Just copying your work now. Oh, look at you. You've got one of those document.write new dates in there as well. Love to see that. Okay. Let's grab the CSS. Who else have we got with us? Alessandra, hey, how are you? Simran, hello, how are you? Right, okay. I don't know why I said how are you at the end of those as well, by the way. I think that's just a strange English thing of always just saying how are you, even though sometimes you don't actually want the answer. Right, I've got so many windows open, I'm losing track of everything I need. So let's just close that for a moment. Oh, wow, look at this. This looks cool. All right, let's grab the screen and then we're going to have a look at Devesh's work. First things first, this looks pretty good. Oh, hey, Ursula, good to see you. How are you? Right, so, okay, so first off the bat, this looks really good. And bear in mind, again, the images aren't loading just because I'm putting this in into CodePen, so it's not something you've done. If anything, it's something I've done. Okay, so first off the bat, this is cool. I like some of the I like the creativity that you've put into this. So let's just take a look at some of the elements. I'm not going to pass any further comment on the design or anything like that. We'll certainly do things like that in the future, though. But let's see. So okay, so there's Nav Bar. Right, yeah. So this looks good. This looks like really well put together CSS on the Nav Bar. The fact that you've only had to use 4 or 5 properties to make it do exactly what you wanted, that's good. That to me looks like something that's been properly thought out. So that's good. And this is what I'm referring to here, this Nav Bar class that you can see that I've kind of highlighted in the bottom left of the screen. You've only got really the bare minimum that you need to make it do exactly what you wanted, so that's good. So really happy with that. You've got good spacing around it as well. So let's see, we've got this main section here, so that's good, using semantic HTML. We've got this container inside of it. Let's have a look to see what we've done. Okay, so we've got main section container, display flex, justify content, align items. That's cool. So it looks like it's doing what you wanted, even though, of course, we've not got the picture in there. But again, that's not your fault. And we've got this little form here. Now, I'm not going to press this button because I've not brought in your thank you page that I saw you had. But this looks good. I'm impressed with this. I mean, it's clear that you've been coding from before Stackademic, for example. But that's good. All in all, this looks good. I mean, if we look at the CSS as well, you're using Flex. You're not writing too many styles, so that's cool. I like that you're using some transitions as well. I think if I do talk about the design for a moment, I think some things can be improved. Like this hover state is okay, but I think the colors could be slightly different. This submit button, I wouldn't make it white because your input fields are white. I'd want this to be something that I want to press a bit more, so I'd make it stand out a bit more. So maybe you'd use like a color that's between kind of green and blue, like a color that's between those anyway, and maybe use some sort of gradient on there, and maybe make it stand out a little bit. At the moment, it's a bit flat, but that's cool. No worries. But yeah, looking at all of this seems fine. Like you've done a really good job with this. Just curious to see why we've got these IDs for each section. I'm guessing these are links, aren't they? Yeah, okay, that's fine. So you know what? This is something that I didn't mention before, but I noticed some of you had used it anyway, so that's really good. Before, when I was talking about when to use classes and when to use IDs, something I mentioned was don't use IDs for styling, but use them typically for things like JavaScript. Another thing you can do is using them for anchor links. What I mean by this is, for anyone who's not aware, obviously, Devesh, I know you're aware of this because you've done it. But you'll see if we're at the top of the page, but I click contact, it automatically brings us to this contact me page. And the reason for that is because if we look at where is it? Where's your contact? Here we go. So you'll see here we've got section ID contact, and this ID effectively works as like an anchor tag. It means that you can click something and it's going to bring you to that section that has the ID. The bit that makes this work is if we look at Devesh's Nav Bar, wherever it is. Here we go. We can see here we've got these links that Devesh is using. But if we do hash contact, basically that's looking for the class name of contact, or the ID, really. So that's cool. But yeah, this is a really good start, Devesh. You can be happy with your progress. If it means anything to you, actually, no, Devesh, tell me in the chat, how long have you been coding for? And whilst you answer that, I will load up a new thing. 4 months. Wow. Okay, that's really impressive. So, Devesh, you think you're not good at designing, but I'll tell you this. When I was coding, it took me at least a year to start to have any kind of idea of what looks better than before. In other words, I was terrible at designing for quite some time. It was only when I really spent more time doing it and kind of analysed other websites and things like that, that I started to get better. But for 4 months, you should be happy with that progress. So that's cool. Right, Devesh, let's mark that homework as complete. Okay, Simran, I'm going to pick your homework because I know you're in the chat. So that's cool. Right, okay. Okay, right, we're just copying over the content into our code pen. And we will just grab the CSS as well. Oh, that's cool, Devesh. You're more than welcome. We'll make sure this process is a bit more fluid next time as well. Obviously, it's the first time I've done this, so I'm still getting used to kind of like what apps are better and things like that. I know some of you mentioned using OBS as well, which is definitely something I'll take a look at. Okay, right. So, okay, so we've put the content in. Something doesn't quite seem right at the moment. Looks like all of the text is still white. Okay. So first things first, we can't see any of the text. So let's fix that. Is it because there's a background image? Probably is, isn't it? I'm guessing it's because there's a background image that isn't white. So let's just put a background color on this for now so that we can kind of move on. Let's just make it black for the moment. Or we'll just go with that for the moment, just so we can see everything. Okay, so that's cool. Right, okay, so first things first, let's just take a look at the nav bar. Okay, so first thing is for this menu that we've got at the top, I can see that we're using a div class, a div here. So we shouldn't really be using divs for. Well, actually, to be fair, you've got the nav in there. That's fine. So that's not really a big deal. But it does look like this is a little bit messy. I'm curious to know why there are so many in there. And another thing, it looks like you've got content spilling outside of the navigation menu. So let's try and figure out why that is. Okay, so the first thing is the menu. You've got a height on it of 100 pixels. That's not a bad thing, but if you've got any content that spills over, it's going to make it look a bit like that. So, for example, if we take that height off, and let's just get rid of that again. Let's just put background color black. Okay, so we're starting to get somewhere, but we've still got this really big space at the top. And I'm guessing it's because we've got something that's either pushing content down or something. Right, so I'm not seeing anything initially that's pushing all of this content down like that, but there's clearly something. Now, what it could be is that we've got this background image here, and we've put a height on it of 110 VH. So generally, what you have to remember about VH is it's the viewport height, okay? So when we say 110, that means that it's the entire screen, everything you can see now, plus an extra 10%. which is not really what you should want because you're creating scrollable areas for no reason. Let's just make this 100 VH and see if it starts to do anything to bring it down. So it's not at the moment. There's clearly something that's bringing all of this content like this. So let's take a look at our navigation menus. Okay, so a big thing here that's causing this menu to look strange is that you're trying to push content with margins when really what you should be doing is using flex or grid. So what we spoke about in the lesson on Monday, that's exactly what you need to use in your next piece. So of course, I know you did this homework before that lesson, so it's okay. Don't feel bad. But let's see what we can do to fix this. So let's take a look for this menu here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is, the first thing I think is we don't need this class here with background image on it. I don't think it's really doing anything of use. Or in fact, at the very least, right, let's get rid of these background sizes and heights on it because they're not doing anything. Okay, fair enough. Do you know what? I can see why you've put them on there. But still, something is making all of this content just sit here. Let's tackle the menu first. So right, okay. So menu, let's go display flex. And then we've got this left menu, line height 100 pixels. Okay, so that's, I'm not entirely sure what the thinking would be between using line height of 100 pixels and floats as well. Like, we don't want to use floats anymore. We just use display. Flex, sorry. So you can see here we've taken that float off and all of a sudden our content's actually gone back up to the top. So that's good. And this left menu, okay, that's fine. Do you know what? We can keep 25% on it if that's what we want. Okay, so we've got best app developers. At least it's showing there. But I'm still going to take that width off of it. I don't even think we need this class. Okay. Right, okay, so for some reason that color still. Okay, so we'll just put it like that for the moment. Okay, do you know what? Let's bring in this H4 again. Let's just leave that on there. That's fine. Left menu. Okay, so what we could do is display flex. Align items center. Right, okay. And then, oh, do you know what? There's a lot of work that needs to be done on this one, Simran. So there's a lot of, do you know what? I think it will take us quite a lot of time to fix this. So let me just give you some advice instead. So first thing is you've got these IDs here, okay, but they're not doing anything with JavaScript from what I can see. You're using IDs to style things, which is what we said not to do. So these should be classes instead, okay? So instead of ID, this should be class. This should be class, and then your CSS here should be using classes, not buttons. So that's something I'll bear in mind. I would suggest staying away from using line height because it looks like it's not being used properly. So I would avoid that. See what other classes we've got here. Okay, so font sizes. We've got some peculiar font sizes here. So for some reason, we've got 15 pixels here. We've got 14 pixels here. We've got 12 pixels here. 15 pixels again here. 25 pixels here. So there's no, I don't see any consistency with what's being picked here for font sizes. Now, something again that we mentioned, I can't remember if it was the Monday that's just gone or the lesson before, was REM as a measurement for font sizes. So what you should be doing is at the top of your page, you should probably have something like body font size 16 pixels. Okay. Now, 16 pixels is basically the default generally for fonts on the web. If you're going anything below 16 pixels, you should have really good reason to do it. If you don't have a really good reason to be doing that, then you're making content that that is probably not very easy to read for some people. But when you use 16 pixels there as the base in your body, then throughout the rest of your content, you should be using REM. So Simran, what I would suggest is revisit the last two lessons, watch them again, and hopefully and take some notes and kind of just build on what you've got from so far. From what I've gathered from this, you have some knowledge of CSS, but there's no structure to what you've written so far. So it's not a bad thing. It just you need to spend a bit more time on it. Okay, so let's move on. I am going to mark this as complete though, purely on the basis that the task was to take a website and add CSS to it, which you've done. But I do think you need some work before, especially before we move on to the JavaScript module in 2 weeks. Okay, right. Let's see who else we've got. By the way, tell me if you're in the chat as well, because I can't see your names, and then at least I know to make sure I mark your work. So the next one I'm going to do is Ursula's, because I'm pretty certain you're still there. Okay. Okay, right. So I'm just grabbing the HTML and CSS Ursula, and then we can look at your work. From what I can see so far, from what I'm grabbing, it looks like the HTML is good. We're going to check out the CSS at the moment. One thing I will say is I can see a lot of IDs on here, and I'd be curious to know why. Okay. Right, okay, cool. So first off the bat, this looks pretty cool. I really like the color choices you've used for the navigation. I think that brown and that kind of pastel-y green works well, so that's cool. Okay, looks like you've got some interesting hovers on here, so that's cool. In terms of the layout as well, like the color scheme's cool. I like that. Like I said, I'm going to try not to pass too much comment on the rest of the style though, because that's not the purpose of this session. There was an image in the background. You say, okay, again, that would just be because it's not been pulled into CodePen, so don't worry too much. That's okay. But if there was a background, then maybe it looks even cooler. I imagine there's a background here for this sips with flavor, and it's not just a blank screen. Okay, so what I wanted to know is, okay, so I'm guessing, so that's cool. So you've got the IDs for this purpose. So that's fine. Now, one thing I just want to make clear is, okay, so that's cool that you're using the IDs in the right fashion for that, if you're using it for that, but you should still not style those IDs. Okay, so for example, if we look at this copyrights we've got here at the bottom, we've got a class of it, a class of copyrights, or an ID of copyrights, but we shouldn't really do that. Don't be afraid to put an ID and a class on the same thing. That's the point, basically. So if we look at this copyrights ID here, really what we should do is have class copyright, and then that should be what we're styling. So hopefully that makes sense, Ursula. Again, just to make it clear for everybody, IDs should not be used for styling. Okay, they exist, but they shouldn't be used for that. So put an ID and a class on the same element if you're planning on using it for links or JavaScript, but you also want to style it. One thing I'd just bear in mind as well is that using capital letters for these IDs is not a good practice. It's not breaking anything, but you wouldn't see other developers doing that. They would just write this as copyrights, if that's how you're doing it. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so sitemap. Okay, cool. So you've got this in a footer here. Got these two divs. Okay, yeah, that seems cool. Let's just check out how you've made the nav bar. Okay, so looks. So it looks like it works fine. Let's just check a couple things on here because it looks like there's quite a lot of classes on properties on there that some of it may be overkill, some of it you might not even need. So let's check. Okay, so for example, what happens if we take fixed off? Okay, so it's just that. Maybe it was because you just wanted the whole thing to be fixed at the top, I'm guessing. Okay, fine. So what happens if we take top and left off? Okay, so it's still doing the same thing. So you can see here, this top and left are redundant. We don't need those. Flex direction. So this all seems cool. This div this flex stuff that you've got there, that's great. And then yeah, you've got these additional things, so that's cool. Z index 99. I mean, it does the job. You'll see some people put all sorts of Z indexes on there. Just bear in mind that 99 is not necessary unless you've got 98 other elements underneath it, in which case they'd all have their own Z index. But theoretically, you could just put Z index 1 on here or 2. It's going to do the same thing. But you might not even need it in some instances. and I'm guessing here it's maybe something to do with the box shadow that you've got on there underneath as well. But either way, you can see we put 1 on there and it does the same thing. So I really like the layout of these values, to be fair. It looks like you've done some really good stuff on here. And again, it looks like the actual values you've put on there, they're all fine. They all make sense. I think this is a pretty good start. I like this. This is good. So really, it was just a couple of things that I pointed out, but I think this is a really good start. So we'll move on because I'm happy with this one. I like it. So let's mark that. And then who else should I pick? Alessandra. Let's see if I can find yours. Maybe not. Let me see. I've got a bunch of new messages. Okay. Right. Let's pick. Who shall I pick? Axe. Where is yours? Have you done your homework yet? If not, that's very, very bad. Not really. It's fine. Rachel's. I'm going to pick Rachel's because I'm not sure if you're there right now because it doesn't show me who's actually on the chat. But we're going to do it anyway. Okay, don't worry, Alessandra. That's cool. So one thing I mentioned to a few people that this coming Monday, is the last CSS class, and it's the end of that module. But there's not going to be any homework for next week, so you'll have time to catch up on things. And the JavaScript module is there'll be a week break between. So next week's the last CSS class, and then we're going to take a week break, and then we'll start the JavaScript class, and Piero will be teaching you from there. So there'll be a week off where you can catch up. Maybe I can help you with things, and we can do some kind of one-on-one sessions as well. Because one thing that's really important is that although you're learning, I think some guidance along the way is helpful. I've lost completely what I was doing. Okay, here we go. So Rachel, just grabbing your HTML. Now, I have a feeling this one's going to be really good because I know that Rachel has studied before. Oh, there you are. Hey, Rachel. How are you? I have a feeling you're, if I remember correctly, you're from, are you from Manchester, Rachel? Or have I made that up? Oh yeah, and exactly. I have to confess, I wrote this assignment. That's okay. It's all good. And yeah, Simran, like honestly, I hope you don't feel bad as well. Okay, and like Devesh says, you'll get better. And we're a group. Okay, like we're Stackademic Squad, all that stuff. So it's not this isn't a challenge. Well, it's a challenge, but you're not against each other. You're not competing with each other. It's about working together as a group. Okay. Sorry, Rachel. You know what? I've got you mixed up with the other Rachel. Have I actually picked the right work? Is this your work that you can see on the screen? And it should. Oh, yeah, that's cool. It should be your work anyway, from what I can see. I've just checked the username on it. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Okay, so first thing I want to point out is this CSS that you've written. At least the naming convention you've got is good. This is actually something we were going to talk about on Monday. Or we will be talking about on Monday, and it's kind of CSS methodologies. And from what I can see here, it looks like you've deployed a what is known as BEM, or block element module, and it's kind of just a way of writing scalable CSS. So it's cool that you've done that. Okay, so let's take a look at this navigation. Cool. Yeah, so this looks fine in terms of how you've done it. You've already got some responsive design on there as well. So you must have been studying before this class, like definitely. I know you said you did this really quickly, but like it's clear that you've got knowledge that you've had for longer than the past month, for example. So that's cool. Okay, so max width 100 VW. So I mean that's fine. It's not a bad thing to use max width 100 VW. I'd probably just use 100% myself, but that's cool. Since January, so not that long at all. Okay, well no, that's cool. It's impressive. So fair play to you. I like that you've used, for example, with things like font sizes, you've tried to use M rather than like pixels all the time. One thing I would bear in mind is similar to what I mentioned on Simran's, I believe. When you're setting font size on the body, try not to go below 1 EM or 16 pixels. Because if you're going below it, then you're making content that's going to be really difficult to read for some people. So, for example, even me looking at this text on the screen, it's pretty small. So I would change that to 16 pixels. And then at least it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so we've got this height of 100 VH on the body. Now, something tells me that's not doing what you expected it to. Because although you've set the body on there, for some reason this navigation is halfway in the middle of the screen rather than at the bottom, which I'm guessing is what you expected to happen. So let's try to figure out why that is. Okay, so where is the footer? Okay. Right. So first thing is what we could do as a quick and dirty fix for this is if we put display flex on here on the body and then do flex flow column. I could spell. Oh, stop it. Is that you gone? There it is. And then what is it? Align items? Align content? Let's just check. Okay, and then it should start to give us something that will be easier to scale. So let's have a look. Okay, so we've got this main here. Right. Okay, so let's just change that for a second to 100%. Right, let me just show you something. Okay. Okay. Right, so if we've got height, okay, so we've got that as we've got the body, we've got a height of 100% on there, so that's fine. And then what we need to do is oh, do you know what? In fact, I think let me just put this link in here. There's a bunch of different ways to make a footer that sticks to the bottom. But if we do, we'll try and just do it really quickly in here. So if I put a div there, and then if we close that div here, and then let's put wrapper. We're going to have to take quite a bit of this content and stick it on here instead. Where is it? Okay, my bad. Right, let's just call this. Right, okay. Well, there's clearly something. There's some other tech. There's some other CSS that's stopping it from doing this. Right. Okay. Because if we've got the body and it's got height of 100%, and then our page wrapper inside of it has that as well, it should start to create what we want it to. But this page is going so slow, it's basically making it very frustrating to actually check. Okay. Wait, so it needs to be on. I think I might know what it is. Wait, so oh Christ, this is so slow. Let's see what media queries you've got. Well, it could very well be. So let's just comment them out for the moment. Aha. Okay. Okay, so I mean, it's getting us somewhere, but there's still something not quite right. So essentially, what happens is if you want to make the footer to stick to the bottom, you can put a height of 100% on the HTML and the body, and then what you would do is you'd have all of your page content in kind of one container element, and then you'd have the footer in another container element outside of that main content. So you'd have kind of like this, if you can see my hands, and this main section would have a min height of 100%, and then that will at least keep everything below it, so that the footer stays to the bottom on some pages where there's not that much content. Okay. Right. Okay, so let's take a look at one more quickly. So we'll mark this one as correct as well. Okay, let's pick Alex Garcia's. Okay. So it looks like the CSS you've written so far looks like you're trying to deploy some sort of scaling to it. So that's cool. And then let's grab the HTML. Okay. Right, so I'm just trying to determine if there was some sort of picture beforehand here, or whether that was the color that you've picked on purpose. Okay, so first thing I'd say is if this is the color that you've picked deliberately, then it's a little bit strange because this is really difficult to read. So let's change that color. And it looks like you've got it on the HTML. So let's change it to, well, let's just change it to white for now. Okay, so Nav Bar looks cool. Looks like it's, I'm guessing this is what you wanted it to do, which is have all the content on the left. One thing I'd bear in mind is that you've got this hover effect when you hover over the links, and I don't know if you can see this in the screen, but it moves all of the content. So it's not necessarily the best, doesn't look that great, let's just say. So I would change that to, rather than it being a border that goes all the way around it, if you do want some sort of border, just do it on the bottom. So let's change that to border bottom. And then at least you have that where the lines aren't moving around. I'd get rid of the border radius as well if you're doing that, which leaves us with that. I noticed in your notes somewhere you mentioned about something taking you about an hour to try and do. Where's it gone? Okay, so body. The below took me like 1 hour. This removes the annoying white border around the HTML document. Well, let's get rid of it for a moment and let's try and figure out what it is that you're talking about. Okay, so right. Okay, so I can see this white border all the way around there. Now, you wouldn't normally have something like that. So that makes me think something's pushing your content. So let's take a look. Let's look for some padding. It's either padding or margin that's doing this. So let's start to get rid of some. So let's get rid of the padding on the footer. Okay, so that's just doing that. That's fine. Let's look for margins. Okay, that's interesting. So that makes me think that this nav is not really created in the best way. What we could do though is if you do want it to be there, then you'd have to push the content below it. So let's just go back up to the top a bit, see where this nav bar is. Okay, so that's main nav, so that's fine. And then, okay, so black white section. Okay, so where's this black white section? Okay, so let's put margin top of 50 pixels. Okay. Right, what is causing this white border that you've got on the outside? Let's have a look. Okay, right. Well, first thing we could do is on the margin, on the HTML, sorry, we could put margin, padding. Okay, so that's not changed anything. What it looks like to me is it's not your page content, it's the positioning of this nav. So let's go back to where that nav is. Let's put top 0 and then left 0. Okay, so that's put that where it should be, which means that we don't have to care anymore about the that weird fix that you'd made for the padding or for the margin. So this is what was causing it. You needed this top 0, left 0 on the nav. If you're going to use things like fixed, then you need to do things like top and left on there. So that's fixed that. And then, okay, so we've got this padding, which is, it's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. But really what we need to do is put a margin top of 50 pixels. Maybe it needs more than that. Maybe something like that. And then we could do padding 10 pixels. Okay, so hopefully you got that one bit anyway out of that. putting top and left on the main nav. Right, so we'll wrap it up there because there's so much. There's still so much more homework, and it takes a long time. But the frustrating thing is the fact that this setup we have is a little bit slow. In terms of like copying data over and everything like that. So I think what we'll do next time is I'll just get 5 or 6 pieces of homework and get them ready first, and then we'll just quickly go through each one. But nevertheless, I hope you have found some of that useful in some way. And if you did, then let me know and we'll do something similar again soon. So, right, thanks a lot, everyone. Take care and have a good one.